All right, I'd like to begin today with an acknowledgement to country, whereby Palladium acknowledges that we are meeting on the traditional country of the Ghana people of the Adelaide Plains, and we pay our respects to their elders, past and present. We acknowledge and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Ghana people living today. We also extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and other First Nations people around Australia. Now, just a few housekeeping before we start. Just please make sure that you're all on mute. Unmute, of course, if we invite you to speak. For questions that you have as we go through, please type it in the Q&A function on the top of your screen. You can just click on that and type it in. Widya will be monitoring the questions and we will hopefully be able to address it towards the end. The session will be recorded and shared with everybody. So welcome. So please keep in mind the size of the group is quite large, as you may have gathered. That's why we were waiting for everyone to come in. And we may not have the chance to get to all your questions today, but we promise we'll do our best. We ask that you keep your questions quite broad, and if you do have questions that are more specifically about you, your program, your study, area of interest, you can email us directly at ncp@thepalladiumgroup.com. Okay, so now I shall go and share. Just to very quickly go through some slides. So the first thing I want to say is congratulations to all of you students who have been nominated, who've gone through the assessment, and now you're heading to the next stage, the interview preparation for your interview. Today's session will cover the dates, the format, refresh you with the assessment criteria, and then we'll go to our scholars for interview advice and tips on how to prepare. And hopefully at the end, we'll have some time to do some question and answers that might come up through this webinar. So without further ado, I'll pause here so everyone can have a look at those slides. Panels will convene on the selected days between the following dates, and as you can see, they are clustered around the regions. So Korea, South Asia and Indonesia, Singapore, Japan, China and Mongolia, Hong Kong and Taiwan, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. Please make sure that you take note of this. You will be receiving an email inviting you, so don't panic, don't. The format. You will be invited to join 10 minutes prior to interview time, once you've booked your interview time, to meet with a panel coordinator who will prepare you for your interview. So, for example, you have an interview time at 10 o'clock in the morning, Australian Eastern Standard Time. You will log in at 9:50 a.m. You will be provided with the interview questions. You will have 10 minutes to read the questions and prepare an answer. After that 10 minutes of reading and preparation time, you will move to the interview room where you will meet the panelists, and the allocated interview time is 30 minutes. The panel will ask you 4 questions. The panel will consist of a chairperson, 2 panel members, a scribe, and a panel coordinator. The panel coordinator, as mentioned earlier, is the one who will be moving you between the rooms. The chairperson is usually a senior Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade official. One panel member is usually a representative from the business community or an international education expert of the region that you're going to. And the other panel member is a representative from the Secretariat. There will be a scribe there to minute your interview as well. Okay. the assessment criteria. Now, you've all answered these, addressed these criteria in your application, so they should not be a surprise to you. But just to refresh you, academic excellence at the tertiary level, leadership and engagement in the community, your adaptability and resilience, and finally, your ability to contribute to the New Colombo Plan strategic objective and outcomes. So very good idea. What did you put in your application? Make sure that you go over that. So the structure for the day, just once again, to refresh your memory, you will join 10 minutes before your interview time. You will be greeted by the panel coordinator. You will get the interview questions and have 10 minutes to review and prepare. Excuse me. And once the panel is ready, you will be invited to join the interview room. Okay, they will admit you and introduce you to panel members and scribe. The panel coordinator will do that, and the interview is for 30 minutes, 4 questions. Here's some tips. First step, you will receive an email from us with your personal Teams meeting link. When the time comes, simply click on that link and make sure that you, like I said, join at the appropriate time. Absolutely make sure you have your laptop charged and check your internet connection. Set up a distraction-free area in a brightly lit room and turn off all notifications because nothing's more annoying than something popping up on the screen. Be on time for the start of your interview. Please review this assessment criteria. Look at your answers that you gave for those 4 criteria, and then you can consider the questions for the panel that you've been given the 10 minutes for. Choose a professional outfit for your interview that would be appropriate, and a good background. If you can't, just make sure you just have a blurred background. That would be fine. Speak slowly and clearly and look into the camera. And when we say appropriate body language, we do mean simply like, that you can be seen very clearly, head and shoulders. You're not slouching or leaning back, because that will also detract from the overall presentation. Questions relating to the interview or login of your teams, etc. The link is up there on the screen, ncp@thepalladiumgroup.com. And again, if you wish to go over the guidelines, etc., please go back and have a look at them, and there's the link to the scholarship program. Okay, that concludes the slides. And now, I'd like to introduce our special guests, Georgia and Joseph. Georgia is studying psychology and is currently in Korea, South Korea, and she started her program on the 28th of August. And we thank Georgia very much for dialing in from overseas. And Joseph will be heading off to Cambodia. I would like both of you to introduce yourselves and give a short overview of your scholarship program, a little bit about your preparations, why you've chosen there, some highlights, and most importantly, a fun tip about yourself. And let's kick off with On My Life on My Screen. So Georgia, if I may, hand over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Georgia Schloss. I am a 2023 South Korea scholar. First of all, congratulations to all of you. To be selected for the interview stage and be nominated by your universities is already a huge achievement. I am a third-year psychology student at the University of the Sunshine Coast. I'm currently studying at Korea University in Seoul, and my program is for 16 months in total. After this semester, I will go to Busan and do 6 months of full-time language training. And then for my final 6 months, I hope to get an internship within a mental health organization here in Seoul. A highlight so far of my programs has definitely been the university culture here in Korea. It is completely different to at home. They have very big sporting rivalry between their universities. And I went on this weekend just past to the Koyon Games, which is Korea University versus Yonsei University. They have a really big sporting rivalry, and they compete in 6 sports across the weekend. The school pride and Korean cheering is something I was not prepared for, but which was just so much fun. I can only describe it as a mashup between K-pop, martial arts dance moves, and very, very polite diss songs. The atmosphere in the stadium was electric. Every single person in the stadium was singing and dancing along. It actually felt more like a concert than a sporting event, and it was just unforgettable. It was amazing. So that has definitely been a highlight so far. For me, one of the draw cards when applying for the new combo plan was definitely the opportunity to connect with people from all over the world. I'm personally really interested in cross-cultural psychology. I think, well, culture significantly influences how we perceive the world and how we think, and having an awareness of this is really essential for establishing meaningful connections with people from diverse cultural backgrounds. So the NCP for me was a really exciting opportunity to connect with people from all over the world and not just learn about their cultures, but to understand how my culture colours how I see the world. And I think finally a fun fact about me is I do MMA, or mixed martial arts. I've been training for 2 years and I absolutely love it. And a cherry on top of my program, I think, is being able to train over here and work with some really amazing gyms. I'm training at Korean Top Team, and they have really high level coaches and fighters, some of whom are on the UFC roster. No one speaks English at my gym, and my Korean leaves a lot to be desired, but I think martial arts transcends language, or perhaps is a language of its own. So yeah, that's me. Again, congratulations to you all, and I will hand over to Joseph. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Thanks, Georgia. Hi, guys. My name's Joseph Mayer. I am one of the 2023 New Combo Plan scholars to Cambodia. I have not left yet, so I'm leaving quite late. I'll be leaving in 2.5 months. So I might actually, I might see some of you guys over there, which is very exciting. My program length is about 18 months. That's the plan at the moment. Now, I will reiterate, congratulations, guys. Getting to this stage is huge. You've passed the hardest part, and there's one more little hurdle to get over, and then you'll be through. So congratulations and best of luck for the next round. So so as I said, I'm going to Cambodia. My rough plan at the moment is I'll be studying for the first 5 months full-time. I'll be studying Khmer, which is the national language in Cambodia. And then I'll be doing about 6 months of full-time study at the Royal University of Law and Economics, which is one of the older universities, one of the older law universities in Cambodia. I'll be studying international humanitarian law, special criminal law, and a couple other units as well. And then for my last 8 months, I'll be doing an internship and a mentorship. One of the internships I'll be doing is with a local NGO that works in looking at the Khmer tribunal reparations and the residual effects of that tribunal and the Khmer Rouge itself in current Cambodia. We'll also be looking at that another NGO works with the stateless community in Cambodia. So I'll be doing that there as well. One of I guess a fun fact about me is my whole DFAT application stage was not quite normal, I suppose. I was from pretty much the whole DFAT application, I was sailing around Australia for 3.5 months, and I had no reception the whole time. So as you can imagine, that made it quite difficult to do anything. And both NCP and my uni were very accommodating. They were very patient with me. I missed so many emails and important dates. So I would not recommend that, but it made my interview process quite interesting and unique. And I'll talk about that a bit later with some of the questions we answer, but that's my fun fact. And I actually did my interview in a small town in far north Queensland near Cape York. It's called Stacey. I don't know if any of you have been there or heard of it before. It's a very small town. There is you have SOS reception, the entire area. which made doing my interview over Zoom particularly difficult as well. Anyway, they're all challenges I had to overcome, and it was quite an interesting experience, but we'll talk more about that later. But yeah, that's a brief intro into me. My kind of program will be looking at mainly to do with anti-human trafficking in Cambodia. So that's like my more broad program plan and goal. But yeah, I'll talk about more on that briefly in our questions later on. Thanks, guys, and congratulations again.
Thank you, Joseph. All right, let's kick off with our questions. So thank you very much to all of you who submitted questions. We have divided them up between Georgia and Joseph. So we'll kick off with Georgia. What sort of questions will they ask of me in the interview?
Okay. Well, obviously, the questions are going to be based around each of the criteria. So you want to make sure that you're familiar with each of the criteria, which I'm sure you all are getting to this stage already. They may ask you to give an example of a time when you demonstrated that criteria, but they may also ask you to explain how you would act and demonstrate those skills within a hypothetical situation. So that was the case in my interview that I wasn't really prepared for. However, if you think about the skills that you have and your experiences, and you can still reflect on something that you've done in the past and then take those skills and that learning and apply it to this hypothetical situation. So the questions may also be two-pronged. So really ensure that you answer both parts of the question. So feel free to ask your panelists to repeat the second half if you need. They will be really, really friendly. So yeah, if you get stuck and you've forgotten the second part of the question, don't be afraid to just pause, breathe, ask them to repeat the question, or yeah, you should be fine. So, thank you.
Thanks, Georgia. Just a follow-up question. So the questions they asked of you, what about questions you asked interviewers?
Okay, so for me, at the time, Australia and Korea had recently celebrated 60 years of bilateral diplomatic ties. And my question referenced this milestone, and I specifically asked, considering this, moving forward, if Australia had any role to play on the topic of South Korea's youth mental health crises and how programs like the NCP might assist in those issues. We had a really great discussion about the issue and how complex it is, and how on a diplomatic level, Australia doesn't really play a role, but the NCP, through its connections and sharing of ideas and research, may have. My question to the panel really underscored, I think, my understanding of the relationship between the two countries. It demonstrated my forward-thinking approach in considering the role of Australia in addressing these issues, and that also tied into my application and my own story. So I'm also aware of other scholars who, they did a bit of research on who their panel members were going to be and tailored their questions to a particular panelist. The important thing to remember is that your question serves as kind of your final opportunity to demonstrate why you should be selected and showcase your interest in your location and your field of studies.
Thank you very much, Georgia. Very helpful. Joseph, what do you think were the defining characteristics of your interview that made you successful? So what are some of the things you talked about that you felt helped you in the interview?
So I think some of the most significant characteristics of my interview actually were things that I thought were weaknesses when towards the start of that process. And what I mean by that is, as I said before, I was on a boat with no reception. So I missed lots of things. NCP, I think, kind of knew that I was a bit hit and miss. They didn't know where I was, what I was doing. I wasn't responding to things, which was very painful for everyone involved. Sorry again. But it meant that I was late. Lots of the things that Marianne was saying before of things that you should do, like be in a distraction-free environment, be professionally dressed, are things that I couldn't do. So when I was in Sasia, I had no Wi-Fi. So I ended up making some friends with some like the local elders in the community I was living in for a couple of weeks. And one of them was actually the head of a cultural center. And so his little studio consisted of maybe 10 easels, and a bunch of the locals would paint every day. And he said, oh, come in my office and use my Wi-Fi. I was like, oh, thank goodness. Anyway, his office was a studio, right? So I was sitting amongst 10 people all painting and chatting and stuff. So my environment was not distraction free. And I was in my sailing clothes, which I've been wearing for the past 2 months. So I was, yeah, you can imagine. I had long hair, huge beard. And I was like, oh my God, these are all things that are glaring. Don't pick me, don't pick me. But what I realized, I had to change the way I saw it. And I think that's something that I think everyone should do. Identify your weaknesses or the weaknesses in your application and make them strengths. I was like, look, yes, I'm in a distraction-full place. I'm wearing tattered clothes. I look disgusting, but here's why I'm here, right? I went on this big trip. I ended up in this place I'd never been before, spent about a month living there on my own. And I made friends. I made beautiful connections. I listened to all stories and I had this amazing time. And I realized, oh, that's actually something that these panelists are looking for. So I think a really important part is to identify your weaknesses and don't shy away from them. Make them your strengths. Address them and make them your strengths. And they became the parts of my interview that were the most, I think, interesting and honestly probably the most important, because they revealed parts about myself that I didn't realize I even had. And that's what they were looking for. I think that answers the question. Yes. Thanks, Marianne.
Thanks, Joseph. Georgia, do you have any tips specifically for doing online interviews? For example, things to be mindful of that you wouldn't necessarily need to do in an in-person interview, which is a really nice segue question from Joseph and his rather interesting interview, which made him extremely memorable.
Well, I would say as much as those things made Joseph successful, try to not do it exactly like that. I mean, we are all, I'm sure, accustomed to doing things online now. So my number one advice is to make sure all your technology is working prior to your interview. Just like you would for an online exam, make sure that you've got good internet connection, you're not sitting in a room with 10 people painting, but know that you are distraction free and it's unlikely that someone is going to walk in. Make sure your speakers, your camera, your microphone, all that sort of thing is working. Another thing is to be mindful of is your start time, because you obviously we are all in different time zones, so make sure that you know what time your interview starts where you are in the world. So you really don't want to be late for this. You've got that 10 minutes to prepare for your read over the questions and reflect. And the NCP runs on a really tight schedule, so make sure that you are on time. What else? Oh yeah, I think things like lighting, body language, your background. Perhaps you don't want a background that's going to be too distracting from you. You can have a couple of things that highlight who you are, or otherwise have a blank background. But yeah, you don't want to have lots of stuff going on behind you. You don't want to be in a dark, dingy room. You don't want to have really harsh lighting. Those are my main tips, I think. So just be mindful of your environment. Make sure your technology works. Be on time.
Wonderful. Good advice. Thanks, Georgia. Joseph, how would you effectively communicate your proposed experience and program in alignment with the NCP goals? So how would you effectively communicate your proposed program in alignment with the NCP goals?
Thanks, Marianne. So I wanted to use this question as a way to address a query that I've had from a couple of candidates about having a long-standing connection to your country. So I don't have a long-standing connection to my country, my host country. I'm not Cambodian. I don't speak Khmer. I've actually never been to Cambodia. And this can be a weakness because, for obvious reasons. But one of the questions I keep getting asked is, well, how do you make this, how do you show that you have a long-standing connection? And I said, well, firstly, be honest. If you don't have a long-standing connection, say that. And secondly, the way I framed it and the reason I chose Cambodia is I am committed to building a long-term, long-standing connection for the future, right? So I think if you don't have a long-standing connection, to your host country. Obviously, this doesn't apply to everyone, but I think there are quite a few people who might be in this situation. Demonstrate your commitment to developing and building a long-standing connection for that host country for the future. Now, the way I demonstrated this is by part of my project is to be doing 5 months of full-time language training. Now, this is I don't think that's that common. Maybe it is, but full-time as well. So we're doing about 25 hours a week of language training. I'm pretty determined to try and become as fluent as I can in Khmer, although I've heard it's incredibly hard to learn. So ask me again in 6 months. And I also, I'll be living with like a host family as well. So I really wanted to throw myself into the culture as much as I possibly could. So I've organized a 6 months homestay program. So I'll be surrounded by non-English speaking, Khmer only speaking people for a long time. But all those things, the reason I'm saying is all these things demonstrated, and other things as well, demonstrated a commitment to building a long-standing connection for the future with that host country. So I think, again, identify weaknesses and turn them into strengths. So that's how I would particularly, I think that's a query I've had a lot about your NCP program. How do you demonstrate you have a long-standing connection? If you don't, be honest, say that. And how are you committed to building one for the future?
Great, thank you. Georgia, here's a good one. Do you have any tips to calm anxiety and nerves prior to and during the interview?
Okay, so I was so nervous for all of my interviews, even my mock ones, and even today, coming and talking in front of everybody, but I think, what I do, my best tip is to have a think about the things that make you calm and happy and confident, and create a little routine to do before your interview, because you've already done all the prep. You've already done all the hard work. The final, that little bit of time before your interview is not time to be last minute trying to, rehearse answers, which, if we get to our top tips later, is my top tip is not to rehearse answers. But yeah, you don't want to be doing all of that stuff right before your interview. You want to be doing stuff that makes you calm. On the morning of my interview, firstly, I checked all of the things that I mentioned earlier. I made sure that all of my internet was working and all that was going. And then I just went and did all my favorite things. I got a coffee. I sat at the beach. I journaled. I went for a swim. I walked along the beach. I made myself breakfast and, just listened to my favorite songs and put myself in a really calm kind of space. And so whether for you, it's dancing, meditation, journaling, power posing, exercising, breathing exercises, going in nature, doing a skincare routine, just take some time to be with you and to slow down, so that, you are in that calm state when you're going into this environment. And I think during the interview, for me, it was all about slowing down my breathing. I had a little mantra written down to repeat in front to myself if I found myself getting stuck or drawing blanks or getting too anxious. So, I think, my main 2 tips are do something that makes you happy and calm and confident beforehand, and just slow down and breathe during it. Like I said, the panelists, they know you're going to be nervous, and they're really understanding, really reassuring. It's not a scary environment. I think the lead up to it and what you think it's going to be like is scarier than once you're actually in there having the chat. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. And I think you've also answered the follow-up questions on what to do when nerves hit you and you blank out. So yes, refocus. You could always ask them to repeat the question. It just buys you about 5 or 10 seconds again to collect yourself. So that's my tip. If you suddenly blank out, could you just ask them to repeat the question? Just take the focus of attention off yourself for a while. Joseph, here's a question for you. What are some tips on answering questions on leadership role when you don't have much experience in any official leadership role?
That's a good question. I think firstly, I had to think through, well, the panelists are expected to be the Prime Minister of Australia, right? So they're not necessarily focused on, or primarily focused on, the status or title of these positions, right? So my thinking was like, okay, well, what are they actually looking for? If they're not looking for status or title, what are they looking for? And I think what I realized is that obviously those titles and those statuses, those positions, those official leadership positions, often are synonymous with building different types of skills, right? So I was like, okay, well, if I don't have those official positions, I'm not Prime Minister of Australia. What skills are developed in those roles, and where in my life have I developed those skills elsewhere, right? So, for example, working in a small team, being a leader, working well under pressure. These are all skills that I think you will develop or hopefully develop in an official leadership position. Now, in my application, I was thinking, well, where else have I built those skills? So reverse the way you think about it. You have to think, I have to have an official leadership position. I have to be the manager of this or the head of this or whatever. If you are, that's awesome. But if you aren't, think about the skills that role develops. And where else in your life can you develop those skills? That isn't necessarily a leadership role either, right? So, for example, I mean, to use the boat example again, I'm going to use it to death. Sorry, guys. I was not in a leadership role on that boat, but working on a 3-person crew under extreme conditions developed similar skills. It wasn't a leadership position, but it developed similar skills, right? So, and you can see how you can make that link to many different things. It can be sporting passions, or it can be other jobs that you've had that aren't necessarily, but you work in a small team environment that develops similar skills. So my challenge would be to identify those leadership roles, what skills are developed with that role, and find other ways in your life that you develop those similar skills that aren't necessarily leadership. That's the question, guys.
Thanks, Joseph. You've frozen, by the way, so you might want to just turn off your camera for a while so the internet catches up. Georgia, what were the most challenging questions asked in the interview, and how did you ensure you responded favorably?
Okay, so in my interview, the adaptability and resilience criteria question was about how I would react in a crisis situation, considering the Indo-Pacific is a region that experiences extreme weather events. And this was not a question that I had, been expecting at all. I was expecting to reflect on, challenges I've overcome in my life and that sort of thing. So for me, I had to really do what I said before, take a breath, kind of reset, think about, okay, when have I been in a crisis situation and how did I react? And so I drew upon a past experience of handling a crisis, which happened to be in India also, which was maybe bonus points for being in Indo-Pacific. But what I tried to do was just detail my actions, the outcomes, the lessons that I gleaned from the situation, and then connected these skills to the scenario that they presented and explained how they could be applied. Ultimately, I tied it all back to how these abilities align and can contribute to the objectives of the NCP. And I think that is the most important thing that you can do. You'll have time to review the questions that they're going to ask. You can use this time to really reflect and consider your concrete examples, but think about how, the skills that you have acquired from all these experiences can further the NCP goals. And when in doubt, remember to revisit these objectives and just emphasize how your program is going to support those goals as well, not just how, the NCP is going to further your goals, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
George, I got a follow-up on that one. What is the best
Yeah.
thing to do if you don't have an immediate answer to a particular question?
I think that it's the best thing to do is to really try and maintain your composure. Don't rush your response. It's okay to take a pause and say something like, oh, that's a great question. Give me a moment while I gather my thoughts, while you try and stay positive and enthusiastic, and then relate back to your experience. If you're completely unsure how to answer a question, you can use a bridging phrase to kind of guide your response back to something that, like I said before, even if it's a future-oriented question, you can guide it back to something that you've done in the past to explain how the skills that you learned there are going to be applied in the future. So, or if you don't have an exact example of something, you can say, that's an interesting question. I don't have direct experience with this, but I can tell you about something similar, and that way you can still showcase your qualifications, your enthusiasm for the NCP, and then always link back to those NCP objectives.
Thank you.
I hope that helps.
That's very helpful. Thanks, Georgia. Joseph, here's one about where do I look? Do you address the camera when speaking, or look at the panel members wherever they appear on your screen?
It's a great question. I had the question last night, so I was testing it myself. I was like, would I look at the camera or the panelists? And I think I remember what I did. I think I hate looking at the camera. For example, I'm just talking to no one, which I know some people recommend looking at the camera because you're making eye contact and it's good. The way I got around that is I adjusted my Zoom settings or my team settings so that my panelists were sitting at the top. So then I could look at them and still I was looking at the camera. So they still thought I was looking at them, but I was actually looking at their photos. That's what I would do. I hate looking at nothing. I feel like I'm just a robot talking to a robot. I couldn't do that. So that's what I would do. I think maybe we're on Teams or Zoom, whatever. I think you can do both options have that setting. You can put their faces at the top, and then it's a win-win. It's also just nice. You're just engaging with other humans instead of looking at just a little pinhole. So I would definitely do that if you guys can. Yeah.
No, that's a good tip. Any recommendations on what to wear?
Yes. So don't do what I did. I think be smart casual. Smart casual is good. You can wear a suit. I think anything is really fine as long as you look proper, smart, respectable. Button up, no tie. I think that's quite a nice in between. Look tidy. If you have a beard, clean the beard, trim it nicely. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, thanks. Georgia, do you have any suggestions about how to best frame a response to an interview question? Is there a recommended structure to follow? And here I think people have referred to the STAR system.
I follow the STAR situation every day for an interview. If you follow that structure, your situation, task, your actions, your results, you're going to cover all of the things that they're looking for. You're explaining yourself. You're talking about the results, the things that you learned, but then always, as I said before, relate this back to the NCP. Relate it back to how it's going to help you on your program, to contribute to those goals. I think if you can round off your answers and remind them that you have direct goals to contribute to the NCP, that is going to really help you in your interview. Also, I think it's been mentioned in the chat, but 5 minutes per response is what you want to be aiming for, because you don't want to run out of time. And like I said earlier, they are running on a very strict timeline. So yeah, STAR all day, every day for me.
Wonderful. Okay, Joseph, what went well in your interview and what would you have improved? What would you change if you were to do the interview again? Or nothing, because you got through.
So I think I might bring in my top tip here. I'll link it in here a little bit. Might talk about it later, but I'm not sure. So I think one thing I spent a lot of time doing before my interview, because I couldn't do much else, I spent a lot of time thinking and meditating and thinking a lot about my why. I think this is really important. I think because I was in a very isolated position where I didn't have much else to do, I was kind of forced down this path. And I realized at the end how important it was. Understand why you want this. And I think your why shouldn't just be the scholarship. This is my own opinion. Take it with a grain of salt. Understand why you want to do the work you want to do. I think to me, this spoke to a much more existential question than just the scholarship. But I think spending the time understanding that, taking the time to understand why I want to do the work I want to do, why I want the opportunity of the scholarship to support my way to achieving my why, was really important, because when I reached the interview, when I was there, what came across was just me. And it was a bunch of my thoughts, and I had lots of realizations on that trip. And so I had a chat with them about it. And it ended up just being a wonderful little glimpse into who I was, which I was a bit nervous about, but I also kind of just really enjoyed it. And I think that was one of the things I think I did well. Is you're at the stage now where you've gotten over like the main hurdles, and the panelists want to see a bit of you. They want to get to know you a little bit. So I would advise against giving really quote unquote boring answers. Be yourself and be proud of who you are and go ham, be passionate. Do those things. And then on the other part of the question, I would then stick to the criteria a little bit more. So I may have gone too far to the other side. It worked, but I think as a general rule, you also want to make sure that I did answer the criteria, but be really strict. Make sure everything you say links back to the criteria, link it always. And you can say what you want, but always link it back to the criteria is really important. I think I could have done that a bit more. But be who you are and revel in that. Be passionate, love who you are, and that shines through. I think the panelists want to get to know you, so don't be afraid of letting them get to know you either.
Thank you. Georgia, how can we ensure a balance between professionalism and showing off our personality? Nice follow-up from Joseph.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to piggyback off Joseph here as well. I think, the key to balancing that professionalism and your personality is to be yourself while demonstrating that you possess the qualities and qualifications that they want to see in NCP scholars. So like Joseph said, authenticity is key. Like, be yourself during the interview. Do not try and be someone that you're not, or give answers that you think that they want to hear, because they will see through that. I think you have to showcase your passion when you're discussing your academic and your extracurricular interests, to convey that you have a genuine enthusiasm and dedication to these things. I think that panelists appreciate candidates that are really sincere and true to themselves. I cried in my interview. Like, I was talking about something that was, really dear to my heart, something that I'm passionate about. And, it was with the weight of everything that was going on, I felt so overwhelmed by that. But I think what the panelists saw in me it was my passion for what I was talking about. So I think, I then pulled myself together, had a breather, because on one hand, you do want to let your passion shine through, and you do want to be authentic, but, how you balance that with professionalism is, you be polite, you be respectful, you don't use your slangs and jargon so much, if you can stay true to yourself, be really polite, that's going to reflect on your character as well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joseph, what's the best way to prepare? What kind of research should one do? You mentioned earlier about, understanding why. What other sort of research would you recommend that our nominated, shortlisted students do?
It's a great question. As Georgia said, there are quite a few people who have who research their panelists and kind of know their area of study and what they're interested in, and they ask questions based on that. That could be really good. I would recommend that. I didn't do that. I think another thing I'd recommend too is, and this kind of speaks more broadly, but I think it's actually really important, is to have, it comes back to that finding out your why, is get people to challenge your why too. Meet, and this I think is just a general good thing to do in life, I've found for my own life, is find people and meet people who challenge your understanding of the world and why you want to do things. Before I had my interview, when I started my application process, my large goal, or one of my aims for my program, was to go and help. I want to go and help. And I think that was it came from a very good place, a place of love and wanting to serve. But what I realized as I met more people, I met a bunch of German backpackers in some rural part of WA, and they were like, what do you mean? They were like, you think that you can go and help a place you've never been to? And I think it made me realize that it made me re-challenge my why, right? And I realized, and I really thought about and reflected on it, that no, my why is just to learn and just to understand. To help imposes some kind of power imbalance that I have my life figured out and those people don't. And even that time up in Sasia, I realized that this Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander community had the justice system figured out way more than we do. If we took up parts of their practices and put it into our system would be astronomically different. And that made me realize that, whoa, like, I'm not going to go there to help. I want to go learn and understand, listen to stories, and if appropriate, share my own story. So I think find your why. By doing that, or to do that, seek people to challenge you. Challenge yourself a lot. Meet new people, mingle with people that you wouldn't usually mingle with. Really challenge yourself. Meditate if you meditate. I found that really helpful. Spend time alone on your own. Really have time to understand and drill down on your why. I can't emphasize that enough. You can research panelists. That's a good idea as well. But really, if you are all over your why and you go into your interview, that will shine through. So really, I kind of said that enough. Really grill down on why you want to. Thanks, Marianne.
Thank you. And I would include that including in the why of why you want to do the scholarship is why do you want to go there to do your scholarship program? So why have you picked that particular location and all locations, rather than, oh, it's a good university and we got an exchange agreement and they're the number 2 in the world. That's not what they want to hear. So you need to fully unpack the why, location, experience, activities. I think that's very helpful. Finally, this is one of the questions that came early. So what are some of the key differences, Georgia, you've experienced between a university shortlist interview and the final interview? Sorry, Georgia, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry. So personally, my university structured our interviews very similarly. They wanted it to be as close to the real deal as possible. We had 10 minutes to look over the questions, and then I had a half an hour or maybe 20-minute or half an hour interview, and then it was all over. So it was very, very similar. And I think that this question really depends on your university, because I know of lots of scholars whose universities didn't do any interviews and they didn't have interviews for their selection process, and it was all written. So if you are in this situation, or if you feel like you want extra practice, which I did still want extra practice, I actually reached out to a previous South Korea scholars via LinkedIn, and we had some Zoom calls, and he talked about his experience, and he also offered to conduct mock interviews with me. I think you'll find if you want information about your host country or about the process, NCP alumni are so willing to help you out. So, I think LinkedIn is a good avenue to be able to reach out and ask some questions. Also, otherwise, ask your friends and your family to come up with some questions and follow the structure of the interview structure. Get them to look at the criteria, come up with some questions, do a mock interview to practice. That way, on the day, I feel like whether your university had a very similar structured interview, whether you had none at all, you will feel less nervous walking into the real deal. Thank you.
A few minutes for the questions that came into the chat. So I think we'll go by the number of thumbs up. So it's one of the most popular ones. Are the 4 questions, this is from Sarah, are the 4 questions normally quite broad and the same for the student, everyone, or are they personalized according to each of our individual assessments? And so not sure whether Georgia or Joseph can answer this question unless you talked to other shortlisted students, or did you get the same question?
Just to let you know, Marianne, that I've been addressing these questions in the chats, so they've all been addressed. Yeah.
So, all right. So
on top of it.
Oh, okay, but sorry, dear. Would you like to tell me, read out the questions that haven't been answered yet?
Sure thing. Which there aren't that many of, which is amazing. So we've got a question here which says, I just want to make sure, is the 10-minute reading time included in the 30-minute interview time? Is that why it's recommended to spend 5 minutes in each question? No. So the interview time is 30 minutes. You get 10 minutes prior to that to do your reading. So you have to sit down, take a breath, have a glass of water, that kind of bits and pieces. But prior to that, there's a further 10 minutes that you need to jump in and meet with us. So we want you to come in 10 minutes before your scheduled time, before that 10-minute reading time, so that we can test your teams. We can make sure that we can hear you okay. There's no echoes. There's no issues with your videos, and just to help you calm your nerves, have a bit of a chat to you about the process, and just let you know everything's going to be okay. So the 30 minutes is 100% dedicated to your interview. So we suggest 5 minutes per question, so that gives you 20 minutes in answering times. You need to take into consideration there will be some introduction. There might be an introduction question and there might be a conclusion question, and the panel will also introduce themselves. They might ask you another question, and we also want to allow some time for you to ask questions. So so 20 minutes of you responding, 10 minutes of other bits and pieces. I hope that helped, Michelle. Now we've got here, let me just scroll through. Who else? Do you have any tips to prepare for those who have their interview next week, given that it's not that long away? Joseph, Georgia.
Okay, I think I might bring in what my top tip was going to be here. Practice, but don't memorize. You know, don't waste your time trying to script answers to questions that you think they're going to ask. Yes, you know, have a think about the sort of things that you will be asked, and have some examples that you might want to use, and maybe have some notes if you think you're going to need them. But don't exactly just rehearse answers that you think they want to be here, because if they do ask you a question that doesn't exactly align with what you've rehearsed, you're going to get tripped up. You know, instead, like Joseph said, know your why, know your story, know your program, and know the goals of the NCP. Understand that bi-directional way in which your story and who you are will contribute to the program, and how you will contribute to your program while you're in country, and then how you can contribute to the goals of the NCP, and why you want to go to this place. What is, like Joseph said earlier, you know, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to go to this country? If you really spend time reflecting on all of those things, then nothing that they ask you is going to trip you up. You know, and we've said it before, you're all here because DFAT has seen something in your application. Now it's just time to show them who you are and how your individual skills and qualities are going to contribute to the NCP and to your program. And, you know, you can't show them those things if you are unsure of them. So know your program, know yourself, know the goals of the NCP, and don't waste your time rehearsing scripted answers.
I'll jump in very quickly. I completely agree. I think, yeah, don't rehearse it to the point where you memorize it, because then you're just gonna get tripped up, definitely. But definitely you can practice it, go through it in your head. I'm a huge mind mapper. So even those 10 minutes I was drawn and mind mapping and whatnot. And that, for me, that really helps me understand my links, my different examples, the different kind of sections for the 4 categories. So I would definitely recommend doing some mind mapping before, even, you know, in the week leading up to it. Have those 4 criteria written out. Plan, practice. Even if you can kind of just, I mean, I have some weird techniques, but I will often just hit my phone record button and just talk to myself, as if there's someone there, and I'll talk through what my key ideas are, what parts I want to touch on, and just kind of practice that linking to different types of questions as well. But I'm a bit strange, so again, take everything I say with a grain of salt.
Thanks, Joseph. Hey, it looks like we've got a lot of questions coming through about when can I book an interview time. Now, interviews are scheduled over the next 3 weeks. So there are a lot of changes and so forth that happens week to week. So what the aim is here is that week 1 interviewees, you will receive your link to be able to book in via Calendly, hopefully by the end of today. So I've just about finished setting all of those up. You will have until Monday to book that in. So you've got quite a few days to pick your time and whatnot. I just want to let you know that the interview times are scheduled per host location. And the reason for that is that we actually have specialists on the panel related to that. So you don't want somebody who's a specialist in Japan sitting on a Pacific panel or vice versa. So they are very specialized, and it is, yeah, you are required to attend that panel time. But there are either 2 or 3 days, depends on which panel you're going on, that you can select your times and your days, of course. So, yep, so week 2 and week 3, hopefully by early next week, you'll have your interview schedules sent out to you as well, so you'll be able to book your interviews then. But week 1's, watch this space. We see the slide again. Is dyed hair an issue? No. Neat appearance. Thanks, Marianne. Thanks for jumping in on that one. I think we're all good, Marianne, so I might just throw back to you. Maybe.
Thank you, everyone. Look at, oh, Charlotte's got her hand up. Charlotte, what's...
Hi there. I was just wanting to speak on one of the questions asked in the chat that had quite a lot of thumbs up, which was you mentioned that we've progressed past the hard part. Does that mean that most individuals interviewed are granted a scholarship? I was just wondering what was the answer to that question. Thanks.
Oh, I'm going to let Georgia answer this.
So I actually applied for the 2022 round of the New Colombo Plan scholarship, and I got to the interview stage and unfortunately didn't receive the scholarship. And while that was massively disappointing, I decided then that I was going to apply again because it was something that I'd learned so much about myself just through the process of the application, and it was something I wanted to see done in the end, you know. And when I was invited to apply again, I took that opportunity. But no, you just because you've made it this far does not mean that, you know, everyone's going to get a scholarship. And, you know, of course, that's going to be disappointing. But like we said before, getting to this stage is massive. Being nominated by your universities is massive. Like it is something you should be really proud of to be at this stage. And obviously the goal is to receive the scholarship. But, you know, if you don't get it, you know, maybe try again next year, because I'm not the only person that I know that has received it on their second try as well. So yeah. Thank you.
You can see that Kang's just sent in a question as well. What percentage of applicants shortlisted by DFAT at this stage are accepted? So as George has just explained, yeah, we can't give you a percentage on that. It depends on how many were shortlisted, how many applications there were, how many shortlisting. It's yeah, it changes from year to year. So there's no percentage that we can provide. We can just say that DFAT do offer between 120 and 150 scholarships yearly. We don't even know what that figure's landing on this year. That's completely up to DFAT. What will happen is that once your interview process has happened, there will be a formal panel report written up for each applicant that's submitted to DFAT, and then DFAT do their deliberations and have their outcomes from there.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. I'm mindful that we have gone past the hour. So I see that there are lots of questions, so please do send in your, if we haven't been able to answer the question, send it through to the ncp@thepalladiumgroup.com. We thank Georgia very much and Joseph for dialing in and sharing with us your tips and advice. And I think that's very important. So I cannot emphasize this enough. Congratulations to all of you for the nomination and for getting this far. It is a wonderful testimony to your skills and abilities. So we wish you all the best of luck for the interviews. And if you've got any without further ado, I'd like to thank my colleagues, to Kylie and Whittier, for helping out behind the scenes. So once again, good luck, everyone. You'll do fine. Thank you.
Best of luck, guys.
Good luck, everybody, and congratulations again.
Cheers.
Thanks. Oh, can I ask a quick question to Georgia?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, Georgia. I just wanted to personally ask, I'm in the same situation as you. I also applied for my NCP scholarship last year, but didn't get in. How did you make sure you got in the second time round?
I couldn't make sure I got in the second round. You know, I just went in.
What did you do? Okay, let me rephrase the question. What did you do differently this time to get in, to convince them to give you the scholarship?
I think the second time round, I went in a lot more relaxed, a lot more calm, having been through the process before. I did the things like in the first year, I really did, you know, I was rehearsing my answers in my head. I was a lot more on edge, I think, and I don't think that I interviewed particularly well. I talked in circles a lot. I didn't get to cover all of other criteria. So I think knowing the tips that I gave in the earlier about knowing your story, knowing your program, and going into your interview with that in mind, rather than, you know, having really planned out and structured your answers to your questions, I think that is the best advice I can give. I hope that helps. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you'd like to have a bit more of a discussion.
I've already tried reaching out. Yep.
Okay.
And I'll do the same thing too. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or Facebook if you guys have any more questions as well.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Good luck, everybody.